going to start this drawing off the same way I've started all the drawings. So first of all, getting a horizon line in there, and I'm doing it on the bottom third of the paper. Right like that, so pretty light, because I know at some point I may need to erase out that horizon line. And then I'm going to be getting in a vanishing point. So I'm putting it near the middle, but not exactly dead center. Notice that for this one, I put my dot exactly on the line, so it is sitting on that horizon line. Remind everybody that this is the 4th quarter on your paper. So these are all small drawings. They're no larger than an index card or a postcard. They're meant to be tiny. So what I'm doing now is I'm taking that vanishing point and drawing lines out. So that first one was below the corner, so it was on the bottom. And then that second one was just above the corner there. That will be the road. And there's a couple lines on the road because there's a sidewalk there too. So I'm looking at my reference picture and trying to determine where are there lines. And for this drawing, there's going to be a lot of lines that are angling back to that vanishing point. I'm just going to correct my line there. I want it to be perfectly to that vanishing point. That's actually what I just drew there. That will become the sidewalk curb. So the drawing will start to make more sense as it progresses. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines below the horizon line at this stage. That little wedge that I drew a moment ago, that's going to be where the sidewalk is, where the buildings will kind of sprout out from, or sprout up from. So I've opted to work from left to right on this, so I'm working on the far left building first, and I'm going to work my way in from that outer edge. So I have to draw the side that is leaning towards the vanishing point, that's going towards that vanishing point, so it is at an angle. It does have to follow that angle to the vanishing point. And you can erase out lines as you go. I'm going to try and do that a little bit better on this one, just so you don't get confused by all the lines. So here is a building that is just behind that first building. So that's the second building on that block. And you could make this simplified. I'm going a little bit more complex because it's got all these interesting forms. It's almost like a nesting box. So it's not just a simple rectangle. It's got all these kind of cube shapes that stick out. And they each one angle to the vanishing point on their right hand side. So here's the rule. So anything to the left of that vanishing point on the left side of the buildings will not go to a vanishing point. Anything that is on the right side of the building will go to the vanishing point. So that first building, we're only seeing the right side of it. That's why you're only seeing an angled side. So again, I'm looking at my picture here. I'm trying to get the angles right and the form correct. Almost looks like a staircase on the bottom part of that building. So this looks a little bit confusing. It's actually fun for me because it's complicated, and I like things that are a little bit more complicated to do. But it isn't easy. So right here, I'm trying to close off the shape, so I'm creating a parallel line. So the parallel line will have to be a vertical line. You can see I just drew a vertical line there. So you don't necessarily have to make this building so complicated. You could just make it a simple cube, just like a rectangular shaped cube. or you could do one cube stacked on top of another. So like the bottom or the base looks like a big cube, and then on top is a little bit smaller cube, which means their corners don't quite align up, which is the line that I was just drawing there. So I could make this even more complicated, but I'm not going to because I don't want to lose too many of you in the process. I want to make sure that this is something you can follow. So I'm looking at what lines connect to the vanishing point. And if you look at the picture, you can actually kind of see the lines that are angling back there. And if you can't, you can actually print that photo out and you can draw the vanishing point. You can find the vanishing point on there and see what lines are actually going back to that point. So I'm erasing lines I don't need so I don't get confused. There are all these little like kind of balconies on that second building, which was kind of cool but also complex. So I'm just looking for objects that kind of pop out on that building, places that pop out, and places that sink in, recess. So FYI, this is the hardest building here. So we're getting this one out of the way first, which is good in a sense. So what I'm drawing right there, that's the side of the third building. That's the third building on the block. And I'm connecting up the corner to the vanishing point, so the corner there to the vanishing point. This building is much easier. It's mainly just a block or a cube. And you can see I'm starting to erase some of the lines already that go back to the vanishing point. That's just so that I don't get too confused, and I want to clean up my paper so that it makes sense visually. And there is another building beyond that one. And it kind of has these 3 tiers to it. Well, 2 tiers, but you can see that there's that top piece that kind of sticks up above the rest. And it does go back to the vanishing point, but very slightly. So you're only seeing a small side of that far off building there. So already you should see if that concept of things going back in space or angling back towards that point, they're getting progressively smaller. Although you can see that some buildings are just taller than others. So even if there's a shorter building in front of it, it's because that building is small and the building beyond is taller. So when it comes to shading, we're going to reinforce that idea of things getting lighter by our use of value. Okay, so now we're working on the other side of the street. So just want to remind you that the rules kind of flip-flop or turn mirror image when you go to the other side of the street. That means that now the right side of the building will not be in perspective, but the left side will. And it is nice to get buildings that have a variety of heights or width. So it's kind of nice that this kind of naturally has that. So they're not all the same uniform, because that can be boring. You want variety in your shapes. So I just drew that skinny rectangle, and then there's another rectangle happening in front. Now I'm going to connect that up to the vanishing point. So corner to vanishing point. And you can see I'm drawing pretty light here. That's really important that you're drawing lights at this stage. You can see I'm kind of angling to that vanishing point. I'm just trying to figure out how tall to make that next series of buildings, because those buildings are kind of lumped together. They're about at a similar height. And I'm going to exaggerate that a little bit. There's that angled line going directly back to that vanishing point. And you can see that line that I drew happens before the corner. So there's some cool wall art and signage on that side. So that'll be fun putting that in too. So that's the side of that sign. The sign that says Copenhagen. And the top part of it, you can see that's just a parallel set of vertical lines. And the bottom part angles to the vanishing point. And then I close it off with another vertical line there. And I've decided to raise that height of that wall just a little bit, so I'm making it a little bit higher. I'll keep the sign there. I'm just going to raise the overall height. And whenever I draw a vertical line, I'm going to try and make sure that it is parallel to the other vertical lines. So that is a mural art that's actually on the wall itself. There's two murals, so I'm going to be drawing those in. And of course, they both angle to the vanishing point. So the top and the bottom angle to the vanishing point. The sides are vertical. So now I'm erasing some of those lines that are going to the vanishing point. Because I don't need them and I don't want to get confused by what they're doing there later on. The basics down, so now I'm going to go back to the opposite side of the street to that first building, and I'm going to draw in equal stripes. So those stripes are going to become the windows. And by the way, I'm just eyeballing this. I'm not measuring an exact measurement. That's one of the reasons why I like using a transparent ruler. It kind of helps to see it and where it's going to go and how much room I have left. But you can do it with any straight edge, really. So if you look at that building up close, there are a whole bunch of stripes, and not all of the stripes contain windows. I think it's every other one. Although at the top there's a big stripe that's just kind of a blank stripe there. So you can see I'm rotating or pivoting off of that vanishing point to get those stripes. Okay, so that works for me. I'm going to go ahead and draw in the windows. So one of the things about the windows is you want to make sure that they are narrow. The closer they are to the vanishing point, the more skinny they become. The farther away, the opposite is true, so they become a little bit wider. So I'm just going to have to keep that in mind. And I'm not being too careful about shading for this. I'm just trying to fill it in and figure out where the placement is. So I'll probably have to go back in and shade it a little bit darker. It's just to help me visualize where things are going. So now I'm working on another set of windows, and this time the windows are going to be a little bit wider. I'm making sure I'm drawing those windows on the same stripe or bar as the first window set. And you can see I've deliberately made them wider. Now I'm going to the next building. So I'm working inward again. And I noticed that there's this interesting little window that's arched. It's actually not little, it's pretty long. I'm just going to fill that in. There's another archway down there. So now I'm kind of going for vertical stripes on this one. So I'm doing 2 vertical stripes down this building. And that's where my windows are going to be placed. And it looks like they go all the way up to the top. So I've drawn those windows on the side. I don't know if you could see it on the left-hand side, but now I'm going to the right-hand side. And I'm making sure that the lines on the left side align to the right. So I'm actually lining up my ruler to those lines and then to the vanishing point. So it looks kind of like 3 horizontal stripes and then 2 vertical stripes, almost like a plaid pattern would look. And just remember, you want your windows to go skinnier the closer they are to the vanishing point. And you don't need any windows on that top bar that I just erased out. Speed this up for you so you can see that I'm just filling in those windows. And again, we'll probably need to go back in later and darken some of those windows, but right now I just am interested in getting them filled in so I know where they are. And I'm also going to fix the perspective on that bottom half of the building because there's an angle that's not quite right. So I'm going to adjust that. So here's the angle that needs fixing. So I needed to draw another vertical line there. And that happens when you're doing perspective. Sometimes you miss a spot. Now I'm going to go to that bottom half of that building and I'm drawing in some windows there too. So if you think this is complex, just think about what the poor architecture went through. They are thinking about aesthetics here too, so how the building looks, how appealing it is. So what they're doing is no less of an art form. Now I'm looking at the other buildings and trying to figure out where the windows are in those buildings too. And I sped this up so you can look at your photograph. There's also a little tree back there, which was why there's that funny looking almost cloud shaped object back there. You do want to make sure with windows that they are even, especially if they're on the side that is not going back to the vanishing point. Those are the 2 signs I put in there really quickly. There is the garage. So try your best, and if you get stuck, just ask for help. It's not a big deal.